Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us for Kaplan's panel this evening focusing on diversity in law. My name is Natisha Smith, and I will be your host this evening. Joining me are some amazing panelists. We have Chinello, a third-year law student at Harvard, who also wears many hats that include being the president of the Black Law Students Association and serving on the board of student advisors. Jack, who identifies as a totally blind lawyer and also works for the product council for Chrome at Google. Joanne, currently working as a diversity inclusion manager, but a former practicing attorney. Anat, an attorney, currently an associate at Baker and Hollister. And then Elisa, currently working in two very important hats as a labor and employment attorney in San Francisco, and also a project specialist at CEO Law. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining me this evening.
Thanks so much for having us.
This is a really important topic, and so I'm excited to have such an interesting panel here to discuss. Before we start to dive in on the ways in which we should be thinking about diversity in law, I think it's really important that we start off by just talking about why this topic matters. What is the impact of a diverse law profession? So I want to start with this first question, and I am going to pass it to Anat to get us started. What is the role, in your perspective, of law in achieving equality within schools, businesses, and other institutions?
So, in terms of why it's important to have that diverse law, I mean, I know from personal experience, just to let everyone know, I am hard of hearing. I have a hearing disability. I wear hearing aids and a cochlear implant. And it's so important for the law to have a diverse group of people because you have so many different perspectives. And for me, I can speak from personal experience that I've always had to advocate for myself growing up. And I've always had to never accept no for an answer, and that and that perspective is very valuable as a lawyer because you're going to come across so many obstacles where people are going to say, no, you can't do this. No, we can't do that. So people who have disabilities especially can come into it with creativity. We think outside the box, if we can't do it this way, well, let's look at it from a different way. We never really back down and we're always willing to try new things and collaborate and find ways to make things happen one way or another. And I think that's very valuable to have.
Yeah, I think Anat, as you were speaking, I was hearing some the importance of different perspectives, like coming from a different background and a different life story is going to allow you to come into a business or a profession or a educational system and really say, what are the barriers that other people might not see, but that I am seeing? And then I think having that law background allows you to say, how do I make this change? Where can I make this a more equitable system? Chinello, I know that this was top of mind for you and talking to you a little bit earlier around understanding unique barriers. For you, how is diversity important in building a more equitable law system?
Hi, thank you. I think it's important because everyone has a very different experience of life, what they've been through, what they've experienced. And I think that if we don't have a diverse group when we're talking about the law, then often we will miss how the law is actually impacting people. And so one thing about being a law student is you read so many cases every day. And at times you can almost forget that you're talking about people. These are people's real lives and they have real life implications. And when you don't have a diverse judiciary, a diverse group of people making the laws, then you may not realize how that's actually impacting people in their daily lives. And so I think it's important to have that because it also gives you an idea of how can you tackle the problem. There's so many different areas of jurisprudence, whether it's civil rights or which can be voting, it can be access to schools, but there's also, it can be privacy considerations. Like what do we consider to be intrusion, right? If there's a lot of conversations around like, well, a judge may not consider that to be an intrusion if it's an experience that they never had. So they can't center that and experience that as the individual that we're talking about, right? So imagine if you had a more diverse judiciary, whether it's, you know, LGBTQ, Black or Brown students, whether it's people with disabilities. There are so many different life experiences. And I think it's really important for us to get to equity, that those are also part of the conversations while we're making laws and making decisions.
Jack, I want to posit this question to you because I think you come from a perspective of both navigating your field to disability, but also melding law and computer science. So how has this shown up in your field of work?
Yeah, so it's a good question. I am one who has never really defined myself by disability, although I am, very proud to have a disability, but never really defined myself. And so I really haven't seen a whole lot of other people like me in law, and in my circles and in the groups that I've been, I've always been the only one, and so that's always been very challenging. I would say that uh, though that the legal department in general has been very open to diversity as a whole. When it has come to disability and the law, probably not so much. Um, and in particular, I think one of the areas where we need to focus, both in law and in other areas, is on kind of the promotion, retention, the career trajectory of people with disabilities, getting to the executive level in whatever organization or group that we're in. I think it's certainly one thing to, and certainly wonderful that we've made inroads so that we can work in the field, but to reach the level of influence at the senior level is really, I think, where we'll start to see more dramatic change. And so that's one area that I'm particularly focused on and particularly passionate about.
Thank you, Jack. I want to sort of build on something Jack brought up, which is just the importance of inclusion at a high level. So thinking about, you're a pre-law student right now, you're in a pre-law because you see yourself in a certain seat, but we need more people who look different, who look more like this panel in those seats. Joanne, I know that you think a lot about diversity and inclusion in your role. What are some of the ways in which you are seeing positive change there, and what are some of the current barriers to improving diversity and inclusion within current law structures and businesses?
Great question. Unfortunately, the needle hasn't moved very much, despite the fact that we now have full-time jobs where people are thinking about this all day, every day. It just shows how entrenched the barriers can be. I think a lot of it is a failure to think outside of the box, or to be willing. Lawyers are risk averse, right? We're always managing risk and liability. And so there's a tendency to just do more of the same rather than pushing the envelope a little bit. And I think we're learning that the hard way through COVID. So in many firms, there was a tendency to have FaceTime requirements, for example, or to expect people to be in the office all the time. And the old language used to be, we can't, we must do this way, that way, whatever. And then COVID has changed the entire game. And we now see that not only could we did it in a matter of days across the entire country. So I think we need to push ourselves to be a little bit bolder around what we're willing to try. And maybe we fail, but we keep failing forward and pivoting and iterating. So some of the things that get me excited are that I think we're starting to see an expansion around pushing back against some of the entrenched metrics that everyone is so fixated on around grades or undergraduate school or law review, all these kinds of law scroll accolades. They're all important, but I do think people are taking a more holistic look these days so that it's not one and done. It has to check every box. I think firms are being a little bit more forward-thinking and holistic in their approach. The other thing that gets me excited is that firms like Munger, my firm, is really focused on building a pipeline. We run a fellows program. So for any of you in the audience who are pre-law students who are looking for guidance, we run a 10-month pre-law program that is very intensive. It's a cohort of 25 to 40 students every year. You get a free LSAT class, and we work you through monthly workshops and give you one-on-one advising on every part of your application. And I think the amount of resources, and I don't just mean like dollars out, I mean attorney time dedicated to our students, is something that gives me hope that we're going to start seeing a shift over time. We now have, more than almost 200 people who have gone to law school through our program. And you have an army of people at law schools all over the country now. And once you start expanding that pipeline, you will start seeing the needle move, I think.
Thank you for sharing that, Joanne. I think that's extremely exciting to hear. And I think, Chanel, it reminds me of some of the thoughts you were sharing earlier around, like, how do you give students maybe some of those softer skills and support that we don't think about? It's like, what's your network? Who's the person putting your name in somebody's ear to get you that internship? Who's the person helping you think about how to craft your story and tell it in the right way? Alyssa, I know you were doing a lot of work thinking about the pipeline of students to impact the future of law. How is this showing up for you?
Yeah, absolutely, Joanne. I'm so delighted to hear that Munger's doing something. Actually, we at SEO, I was going to say you're doing something, but you've been doing it. And us at SEO, we've just started doing this year. This year, we launched the Catalyst Scholars Program. We got over 1,800 applications, and we chose 52 scholars. So what this program does is similar to Joanne's program. We offer, small private LSAT classes that's complimentary. Actually, we work with Manhattan Prep, which is under Kaplan's umbrella. And we also offer admission support. So resumes, essays, and whatnot. And we also actually offer what we call the law school tours, which is really intimate 30-minute sessions with all the top law schools across the nation. And Natisha, to go back to your question about how has change been manifesting itself, is that, when we prepared for this Catalyst Scholars Program, we had a lot of conversations with law school deans, law of admissions, directors of admissions at law schools. And I think, as Joanne is saying, they're interested in creating a pipeline. So in the past, it'd be like, okay, yeah, we have to get our diversity numbers, et cetera, et cetera. But now they're like, of course, because of BLM and the movement that this has caused, they're very interested in students who you might not have scored the top LSAT score or the top GPA, but you have an interesting background and a unique background. And what they're telling us, and I'd like to share to the students today, is, apply anyhow. Even if you don't meet their median score, just apply. They read every single application and they're interested in hearing about you. So, this is a great change. And I think that it'll trickle up to the law firm recruiting and the law firm retention as well.
Alyssa, I love that you sort of made a call to, like, don't filter yourself out, right? And I think there's a lot of talk, I don't know, I have mixed feelings, but imposter syndrome is a conversation that if you're a woman, if you're a person of color, if you are differently abled, everyone talks about it. And while I think sometimes the term is used very cavalierly, I do think that there's something true around when you don't see people who look like you, or when you feel like there's a bar or metric you can't meet, that you also then have a perception of yourself that can limit, like, you getting opportunities that you actually very much deserve. So with that, I kind of want to pivot us from talking about high level, what does this mean for businesses and law and equity, to talking about the personal. Each of you are individuals who came up into the roles that you're in today without a lot of representation. It's getting better now because you were in the spots that you were in. And so I want to hear a little bit about, like, each of your stories and, like, what it took to get you into the positions that you are in today. Anat, I want to start with you. When you think about your story and getting into law, what really sort of was a pivotal moment for you?
There's just so many. I can't think of one, but I can tell you that in terms of, I'm sorry, my story is, when I was going through the process of law school, I really thought I have a disability, but I'm not going to let it stop me. And a lot of people were naysayers about whether I could even be a lawyer. And then it was, I had advisors in college saying, okay, you want to go to law school, but you're not going to be able to be a litigator, which is what I am. Maybe you'll be a transactional lawyer. You won't have to communicate too much. And you won't have to interact with people. You won't have to worry about hearing people in courtrooms. And so it was just a constant stream of people telling me, no, this can't happen. You can't do this. You can't do that. And I said, who are you talking about? Of course I could do this. I'm going to make this happen one way or another. And that's exactly what I did. And of course, the negative responses didn't stop when I got into law school. I had a lot of obstacles to deal with once I got to law school, but it just pushed through. And, I learned I realized I was, as much as that I knew how to advocate for myself, and I just had to keep doing it. And it was really important for me. And a really important moment for me actually came after I graduated law school and I started practicing. And I started getting, you talk about imposter syndrome, and I started going to court. And I got very nervous about asking the judge to wear a microphone. That's one of the assistive devices I use to help me hear the judge or others around me. And, I'm going into federal court, into all these people, and mostly men and older men. And I'm going to walk in and ask the judge to wear a microphone. And I didn't do it at first. And then I had a partner who was working with me. And I explained to him I was having a hard time hearing. And he said, why don't you go and ask him to wear your microphone? And he said something that really stuck with me: stop handicapping yourself. And that just really struck the core for me, because I knew I had a handicap, but as much as the world constantly gave me negative feedback, negative energy, I realized at the end of the day, it's me who was holding myself back. And so that's the mantra I constantly keep with myself: to stop handicapping yourself. Go for what you need and what you want, and you never know until you actually pursue it.
Thank you. It seems the core part of your story is just like flexing that muscle of self-advocacy and being uncomfortable. And I think, Anat, thank you so much for being so honest. Because I think sometimes when we talk about people who've made it, it just seems like they just got it figured out. Like they just came out confident people, no barriers, no roadblocks. They knew what they wanted. And I think to hear, like, you know what, even as much as I believed in myself, I had times where I didn't feel comfortable asking for what I wanted. I had times where I recognized that the people around me didn't look like me or didn't understand my experiences, and I felt less comfortable, and here's how I pushed through it. I think that's a really important takeaway that was helpful for me to hear, and I'm sure helpful for our audience as well. Joanne, I want to sort of pivot to you. When you think about your story, what were the things that allowed you to get past the lack of representation and see yourself in the role that you're in today and reach the level that you've reached today?
I sort of never got past the lack of representation, if I'm being honest, which is why I'm doing the job I'm doing, because I demand it. I require it everywhere that I go, and I think we all should. And honestly, the only way I survived law school was with the same approach. I am the first in my family to go to law school, and went to Berkeley and assumed it was going to be this diverse utopia, and I would show up and there would be all these brown and black people running around. And I got there, and I think I was one of 3 Filipinos in my entire class. And there were so few people of color. I just was shocked. And I honestly almost dropped out after my first semester. I was so miserable. I just didn't feel like I had a community. And I had some very, very close friends from undergrad who attended with me, who were my saving graces. But the lack of representation really took a toll on me in a way I did not expect. Because this is harkening back to a comment that was made earlier, but for me, the law is so much more than just professional. It is very personal, how it has impacted my life, my community's life, my family's life. And so to not see anybody else who feels that way about it in the classroom, who is talking about it from a personal point of view rather than this abstract hypothetical, was really hard for me my first semester. And the way I survived, honestly, is building that community and spending my time making sure that there were more people who had access and an easier path through the door than I did, to make sure that every year it was getting more and more diverse. So my 1L year, we started a women of color organization at Berkeley called the Women of Color Collective. It's almost 11th year anniversary now. And it saved me in law school. That community was what saved me and got me through the rest of the 2.5 years. Finding people who had shared backgrounds, shared interests, and could be my people in law school, or what carried me through. And I consistently look for that and try to build that in every space that I'm in. And to the extent that there are folks who are worried about showing up and being the lonely only, it's likely, I mean, things are getting better, but we're certainly not anywhere near where we need to be. And so you need to sort of flex those muscles and build the space. If they're not there for you, build them. Find that you will find people no matter what environment you're in. And it's critical for your own security and safety and progression to build that community to the extent that you can. That's what's helped me so far.
Chanella, I want to pivot to you because I know that you are actively doing this community building work. So of course I want to hear your story, but I also want to know what empowered you to take the position that you've taken with the student advocacy group that you're in.
Thank you. So very similar to many of the talk that we're talking earlier, it was about, I think, making sure that I had community on campus. And I think there's a lot to, you mentioned earlier, this like conversation about imposter syndrome. And it's something that honestly, I wasn't aware of like the lexicon and the terminology prior to like really entering the law school. It had never been framed in that way to me. But I feel very strongly that any person that's in this space, whether it's a Black and brown person, is deserving of being in that space. And I don't, like, you're not an imposter. Like, if you're a pre-law student right now and you're thinking like, should I be applying to Harvard or Yale or NYU, whatever the case may be, the answer is yes. Like, you deserve to be in that space just as much as anybody else. Does it take work? Yes. Does it take many hours of reading? Yes. But do you deserve to be there? Absolutely. And I felt that in my first year of law school, and anybody who's been through law school will tell you the first year is a marathon. It's not a sprint, but it's also a learning curve because you're reading cases and it's the first time you've ever read case law. And you're like, this is unlike anything you've read before. And the volume of amount of reading that you may be doing is also unusual. And so for me, I was lucky that I had a collective of Black women who were in the same section. So at HLS, you take your classes, your first year law school with the same 80 people. You take the same class, all your classes with those people. And they were my rock. We studied together. I didn't study just with them. I studied with other people as well. But I could also be like, Boston is very different. I'm from Georgia, very different. It's cold. It's not as diverse, a lot of things. And so it was nice to have that rock and that community to be able to say that, no, I deserve to be here just as much as anybody else. And so I really made it, that became an integral part of my experience. And I had so many people who weren't just Black and brown. They were also allies, as many would people say, who were trying to help me navigate the space. When I had a question, they would answer, whether it be a professor, a dean, whatever the case may be. And I wanted to make sure that students who came behind me had that same opportunity. And so for the members of BALSA, they know that I've kind of navigated I'm president this year, but I was vice president last year. My time there around this idea, it's actually put forth by Michelle Obama about these 3 friends that you have, and the one that goes before you, the one who's right alongside you, and the people that come, and the friend that comes behind you. And so that's how I felt. I had my friends that were right beside me. There were the girls that were in my classes with me, right? And there were the people that came before me that were answering my questions. But then there were people that were coming after me. And I wanted to make sure that we left an infrastructure that they would have one less question than I had, that there would be one more light post than what I had, right? And I think that we should be doing that for everyone, right? But I did it through BALSA because that's where I found community. And so that was a big part of why I got involved. I hope I answered your question.
Oh, that was more than I could have asked for, and I specifically appreciate understanding that it is incremental. I know that sometimes, because we are not the first group of people to talk about diversity and inclusion issues, right? To Joanne's point, you never really get past it. Like, we are all engaging in this work because it is still a barrier. But I think, Chanel, that was a really great framing of, if there's one less question, if there's one less missing step, if there's one less barrier roadblock, that continues to pave the way. Jack, I want to pivot to you, because I know that self-advocacy and knowing that you are able to achieve the same things as anybody else has been a really core part of your own story, and not defining yourself by your disability. How did you navigate your entry into the law school experience?
So my experience was a little bit different, I think, than many other people. I actually worked for a number of years before I went to law school. I didn't apply to a lot of law schools. I took the LSAT, thinking to myself that, if I do okay, then great. If I don't, then I won't go into law. So it was kind of just a very black and white thing. And I think that it was really built on a prayer. I said, Lord, if I'm supposed to go, then I'll go. And so law school wasn't the challenge for me. More of the challenge actually came, I think, post law school. But I think that the little challenges that I did along the way helped me to develop the skill and the muscles to be able to take on the bigger challenges, and the fortitude. Um, so going to law school was a very different experience than going to college. I went to college at Harvard, and I had very few books and materials at the time. I advocated for them, but they just weren't available because there weren't any volunteer readers to really do the reading. By the time I got to law school, I knew that I had to get my materials early. And thankfully, I was able to do that and find someone in the school who was able to help me with that, because now we had books that were electronic in PDF form, which is much easier for me to use. But like, that little skill helped me, and to see this as a challenge I could overcome really helped me to build up to the bigger ones. So that when I graduated from law school and I wanted to take the bar exam, I went to the National Conference of Bar Examiners and I said, "Hey, I want to use a computer to take the exam." And they said, "No, you can't do that." They said, you can take the exam in Braille, or you can take it on a cassette tape. And I'll tell you, like, I'm not a good Braille reader, but taking the bar exam, which is like, what, 250 pages on a tape recorder, is like reading off of a one-line teleprompter. It's really, really hard. But if I had not taken those little challenges early on, and they were difficult, they weren't easy, but if I had not persevered through those little challenges, I think the bigger challenges would be much harder. And so, like, even after law school, after graduating from law school and taking the bar exam, there were even bigger challenges. And like the challenges that I face now, I think one of the big mistakes that I've made, and I think other people on the panel have very well highlighted, is I never really found a community. I didn't really think there was a very strong community of people with disabilities who were in law, certainly not in any of the departments I ever worked in. And so one of the things that was kind of a blind spot for me was the need to call out unconscious bias. Right? Unconscious bias is something that you can't really prove very easily, but you know that it's there. And I waited way too long to call out unconscious bias. And who knows whether it'll ever make a difference in the long run. But for my own personal growth, my own personal satisfaction, just being able to actually call it out if I saw it was really transformative for me. So that is kind of the big challenge these days, is really understanding and calling that out. And that is the next kind of mountain for me to try to tackle, and to get people to recognize that this does exist.
Thank you, Jack. Alyssa, I definitely want to hear from you as well, because you've had such a diverse career and are working so hard in this space. how did you get here knowing that representation was a barrier or roadblock for you?
Sure. So I think, like Jack, my story of struggle started, post law school. I mean, there were the typical questions, before I went to law school. I don't have any lawyers in my family. I think my dad, when I got into Harvard Law, he was like, "Oh, so you're getting another bachelor's degree?" I was like, "No, I'm going to law school." And he's like, "Oh, you don't need to do that." But what I found really difficult for me was when I started practicing law. I went to a top 10 law firm in New York City. And as Jack was saying, there was a lot of unconscious bias. And in addition to that, I joined a practice group that was, predominantly white, male, had a lot of them were from families of lawyers. And in addition to the unconscious bias, there was a lot of explicit bias. One partner walked into an office, and it was me and another attorney working, and he's half Asian. And the partner walked in and he said, "Oh, should I take off my shoes because this is an Asian office?" And I was like, "Wait, what? Our shoes are on? Like, we're not even talking about fashion law. This is like a real estate provision." Another time there was a partner who, she said, "I'm just going to assume you have no lawyers in your family." And I was like, "Whoa, wait, you don't know anything about me. Where did this come from?" But like Jack said, I also struggled with, should I report this? Is this important enough to report? And it took me actually several months to go through that. And I actually ended up deciding to report it. There's only so much. I think you were saying it's incremental changes. And the partner who made the shoes comment, he might always be racist, or unconsciously or consciously, but at least now he knows not to say that to other people. So there is incremental change that is happening, and it's slow. I agree with Joanne, not enough has been done, but that's why we're here. And the more we speak up, I think the better it's going to get for diverse attorneys.
And I think the more that we hold space, right? Like in some ways, by other people, non-diverse groups, seeing a diversity within their field, it makes them say, like, I now see this person doing this job really well. So I thought that someone like Anat would have all these barriers that couldn't be surpassed, but like look at her kicking butt in her role and doing a great job. I want to pivot to an audience question quickly, and then I want to dive a little bit more into the topic that's been coming up around implicit biases. But first things first, one of our audience members asked, have you heard about the experiences of DACA law students? If so, could you share a bit about it? Also, what are the challenges and opportunities for DACA and or undocumented students pursuing a law degree? I know that part of that question is like, how keyed in is this group to the DACA challenges? So I kind of want to open this to anyone who feels comfortable speaking on this topic. Do you have any thoughts on how DACA students are navigating law school right now?
Well, we've had several DACA students come through our program. So several of them are in law school right now. I will tell you, for those students who are pre-law, applying to law school is a lot of work. It takes a lot of time and effort. And unfortunately, my experience has been that folks with DACA have to put in more work at the front end because the rules are different state by state. You want to investigate scholarships and financial aid, and all of that is sort of, can you pass the bar in certain states? All of that is sort of state specific. So it requires an extra level of detail and research that unfortunately you'll have to undertake. That said, I can make a plug here because one of our fellows, who's actually currently a 1L at Harvard, is amazing. And she is working with an organization called Immigrant Rising. And they are making resources available for undocumented students who are interested in going to law school. And she is working on authoring sort of a pre-law guide for DACA students coming soon, I believe. And I took an initial look at it, and it's fantastic. So for the DACA students in the audience, check out Immigrant Rising, sign up for that newsletter so that you can get access to those resources when they become available. And she dives into all of these details, things to consider as you're going through this application process.
Joanne, while I have you on the hook, another audience member asked you just to repeat the name of the 10-month program that your group supports.
Sure, it's called the MTO Fellows Program. If you go to mto.com, M as in Mary, T as in Tom, O as in Ocean, and go under diversity, you'll see it there and all the information will be there. We haven't published anything for next year's cohort yet, but keep an eye on the website and more coming soon.
Awesome. Thank you, Joanne. So I want to talk a little bit about, we've been talking about some of the sort of implicit and in many cases, sometimes explicit ways in which biases of people in power or peers may show up. I want to pivot us to sort of thinking about our pre-law students and like what barriers they are facing. So, Alyssa, Joanne, Chanella, we're all talking about the need for these pipeline programs, which indicates that there are extra barriers that need to help students get past in order to increase diversity, even at the application/acceptance level. What are the barriers keeping us from naturally having a more diverse group of students entering law school? And Alyssa, I will start with you on this one.
Sure, absolutely. We see this a lot with our Catalyst scholars. One thing that we've realized, and it makes sense, is that there are the typical barriers, finances, the more tangible ones, but we've also realized that our diverse attorneys, law school applicants, they're not used to being selfish in the sense that because maybe they're living with their families or earning money for their parents, they're not used to saying, closing the door in their house and saying, Mom, Dad, I really just need to focus on my application. And that's for a number of cultural differences that, non-diverse law school applicants don't really necessarily face. So one advice that I would give is to be selfish when you are applying to law school. That doesn't mean you have to be mean. You don't have to say, Mom, I'll talk to you in 3 months.
I think Elisa may have frozen. Oh, there you are. Oh, we lost you for 1 second, but you are back.
So there's a reason, I don't know where I cut off, but there's a reason they say put your mask on first before you help other people put their masks on when the plane is going down. If you're going to law school to, like Chanello, I know, is to help advocate for other people, then you need to focus on being a little bit selfish. The other barrier that we see is that, this lack of community, not knowing who to turn to for advice on their applications. And our best advice is, there are actually a lot of resources online. Even if you do a quick LinkedIn search for other, pre-law students, you might be able to connect with others. In addition, we recommend that our law school applicants, they start early. So if you start early, then you'll be able to give your resume to more people to review. So even if it's just, you don't know any lawyers, but you may know someone who works in an office somewhere, right? So give your resume to that person to review. So that's why you need to start early. The main thing is to start early and then also put yourself first. And as I said before, believe in yourself. Don't put yourself out of the game just because your LSAT score is or is not that high. Law school admissions officers know that there are barriers and disadvantages that many applicants have had when taking the LSAT. And it's a median, like half their students go below that and half go above that. So don't take yourself out of the game. I know I've said that before, but it's very important.
Well, I think it is very important because that's such a huge metric, right? And it feels like it's like, I looked up the school, I saw the average applicant score was this. It is really fast for that to be an immediate barrier or incredibly intimidating for a student. And so I actually don't know that you could say it enough, Elisa. I think it's really important to say, if you believe that you want to be in this space, there are other parts of your application that matter. And obviously study, prep, try to get the best score you can, but don't let one part of your application define whether or not you're going to apply. Joanne, from your experiences, what are some of the barriers that are still impacting the pipeline of students that we are trying to sort of increase and make more diverse?
Yeah, I think, I echo a lot of what's already been said, but I think there's a a tendency to assume that it's too much and you won't make it, right? Like when you don't have a roadmap and there's not a lot of folks in your own community who've already been down that path and you don't have endless resources, the assumption is, well, it's too much. I'm not even going to try. I'm here to tell you there are resources out there. There are many programs like our program, like SEO, like some of the, like there's a program based out of Chicago called DAPP, Diverse, DAPP. I don't remember what the letters stand for, but many other law firms have pre-law scholarship programs. There is an increasing number of resources being thrown at this. So to the extent you really want this, go out and get those resources and get the help to help get you over that hump, because the profession needs you. Like we need you. So there's no reason for you to take yourself out of the game. There's so many attorneys like me and everybody on this call that want to make sure that we have a fulsome pipeline going in. The one thing I've seen the most from our fellows is fear, honestly, just fear and an assumption that they don't have what it takes, even though all of the data shows that they do, that they demonstrate grit, that they've overcome incredible personal circumstances to achieve everything they've achieved thus far. Competition is the thief of joy, okay? So you don't have to compare yourself to everybody else who may or may not be in the pool. You bring something so different. And I know that this happened to me too. When you're in your own community, you assume you're not different, but you are. Like your application will shine in that pool because there are not enough of you applying and enriching that pool. So please don't stand in your way. I'm with Alyssa, don't take yourself out of the game, shoot your shot and look for programs that will help you do that if that's what you need to get over the hump.
I just want to jump in and I echo everything that's been said so far. And I just want to add that when you're working on your application, don't be afraid to talk about what makes you different. You know, whatever background you come from, you're different. Your difference is what makes you unique. One of the best pieces of advice I got was for my essay, whether it was for college or for law school, talk about your challenges, talk about, you know, what for me personally is my disability. But when you share those aspects about you, that's what makes the application officer take another look at your resume, at your application. And they say, okay, this person's LSAT score wasn't, you know, as high as the others, but look what else this person brings to the table. And so really don't hold back. And this is the time, you know, we're constantly saying you have to self-advocate. When you're applying to law school, you have to be your biggest advocate because no one else will do it for you.
Chanela, I've seen you nodding along with a few of the comments being made. From your perspective, especially, you know, you talked a little bit too about like how are 1L students engaging, interacting, and getting involved. When you're thinking about the barriers at the student application level, or even just starting off in law school, what are some of the things that sort of stand out to you in ways that students can surpass those challenges?
I want to echo everything that everyone has already said, but I think a big barrier is, I think, being filtered out of the pipeline, right? And so there's a lot of steps along the way in where people are told, well, maybe that's a reach school, you shouldn't apply there, right? And so maybe I had the good fortune of like, I don't know if it's like young, just like you can't stop me energy when I was younger, or what it was. I don't know if it was arrogance or whatever it may have been at that time, but I feel like there's so many times where you may go to your PreLaw advisor and they say, well, most applicants at this school have this kind of major and you did something completely different, so don't apply. That's just not, I'm going to tell you that that's just not true. And I don't think it's necessarily coming from bad advice, but I think that people tend to be risk adverse and they don't want to feel like, oh, I should have told you to not do it, that you couldn't make it. And so I'm at HLS and I'll say that everyone I know has a completely different background. It's not one person. There was no one singular HLS model of what makes a Harvard Law student a Harvard Law student, right? But so there's that piece. And then I think it's to this whole like being selfish piece. It's also like being tenacious, right? So when I was studying for the LSAT, I was like 24, 25, I don't remember exactly, but I shut down my social life. I was like, I was working at the time, so I'm going to work and I'm going to study for the LSAT. And that's what I did. And it wasn't fun. It was middle of summer in Georgia. It was the best time of the year, right? But it was like worth it. And so I feel like also don't cheat yourself of the opportunity by being afraid to chase it. Like, chase it. Maybe you'll get there, maybe you won't get there, but you won't know until you try. And then I think the next part is about asking questions. One thing that I know I worked in the Big Four, I worked in consulting before law school, and even now being in law school, is that closed mouths don't get fed, right? Like, people who don't ask questions don't get the help that they need. And so I would watch when I was at consulting firms. I had 2 colleagues want to go to India, right? And they just asked. You're not supposed to go to India until like you were 2 more levels above, like staff positions above what they were. But they put themselves out there and asked the question and made a case for it. And they went to India, right? And I was like, should have made a case for it. I could have went to India, right? It's the same thing when it comes to going to law school and the application process, and once you get to law school, right? So if you're unclear once you're at law school how to navigate a professor's class, they have office hours. Go and ask, hey, I don't know, is this the way in which, how would you approach taking your class? What do you think I should be focusing on when I'm reading? Because each professor writes their own exam. When you're in the application process, right, don't be afraid to reach out to students at those schools or admission officers at those schools. So I know, like, also we just finished up a line of college tours. We had these Zoom meetings where you could sign up and we did these panels, right? But if you go on BALSA's website, my president email is there, and so is our membership, like, recruitment email. And if you reach out to us, there are BALSA students ready and willing to help you navigate how to go through that process, how to write an effective statement. We do like office hours, but it's just the reality of the, like, closed mouths don't get fed. If you don't ask, you'll never know. And what no one ever tells you when they're telling your success story is all those people in the background that help them figure out, hey, this is how you do the logic games on the LSAT, or you're successful in an interview, right? So you need to know someone who's done it because it's really a puzzle. And so I think that's the other thing that I think keeps people out, because sometimes it's like the people around you may not be the people who can answer those questions, but we live luckily in an age of, like, the internet where it's like they're one Google search away, and I promise you that much.
Janelle, it's almost like you set us up for this audience question, so thank you. So one of the things you noted was people getting in their own way, assuming that they need to have a certain type of background. There's like this perfect Voltron they're going to put together to be like the best possible applicant, and that maybe not being true. One of the questions we got from our audience is majoring in pre-law a good idea or a bad idea? I've heard so many mixed things regarding specific pre-law majors as opposed to philosophy, business, or poli-sci, or any other major. So any thoughts on students sort of navigating, like how do I set myself up to get into law school? Alyssa, I see you nodding along to this question. I know you do a lot of pipeline support, so I want to pass this one to you first.
Absolutely. Actually, I was just thinking of Jack. I know Jack, he mentioned he did computer science. There is no, and as Chanela was saying, there's no one path. You could major in film studies and go to Harvard Law School the next year after graduating, right? There's no one path. And this is still in line with do not write yourself out. The one perhaps advantage of taking, a pre-law major, if it exists at your school, is to really use that as an opportunity to see if you are interested in law. Law school is a big commitment. We talked about tenacity, and you're going to be in law school for 3 years, and then it's a large financial debt to take on. Use those pre-law courses, not to get into law school, but to see if it's the right path for you. And maybe it is, and maybe it is not.
Oh, Janella, I saw you.
Yeah, I was going to say to that piece, I think definitely to the pre-law major, most of your, like I think most schools, you can download like what makes up that major, right? So like look at some of those courses and maybe take a sampling of them if you don't want to necessarily major in that. So I was an economics major at UVA, and I thoroughly enjoyed being an economics major, and it allowed me to do what I did immediately afterwards. But that's what I found interesting, right? Surprisingly so, to my own surprise, right? Like that's what I found interesting. And now when I'm at 3L now, so I've already gone through the, hiring interview process. But that was a big piece of when I was talking with firms and hiring, and they would ask me about my background in economics, right? So I think that saying like, oh, I have to do this pre-law major to get to law school might actually undercut, because maybe you won't have that story, right? Like, whereas like if you did something that you actually were interested in and could commit to. And then I also would think that I think the biggest piece is whatever major you pick, right, is trying to do your best performance wise, right? So college is fun. I was a Wahoo. I had my fun, but I also had to do my work. And so I would just say, whatever you pick, try and show up the best way that you can, and also make sure that you find professors while you're at your college to make connections with. And so that's why I say it's probably more important to take a path that you will find interesting. And of course, you have to balance it with your decision about what career options, and that's a personal decision for everybody. But I definitely think making sure that you also make professor connections in whatever major will be very helpful in the application process, because you'll be able to get letters of recommendation, and also you will find out that university professors are very well-connected people and see and understand how schools work and the way in which they may be able to actually point you to someone to say, hey, this person can help you navigate the law school process. Like, I'm your econ major, I don't go to law school, but I see enough students who do this every year. This is the way to go, And so I think that's the things that you should maybe be thinking about.
I just want to jump in there. Law is very diverse. If you think about it, agricultural companies need lawyers, actors need lawyers, tech companies need lawyers. So just to echo what Chinelo is saying, we need lawyers in every industry because there is law in every industry. So major in something that you are interested in and you're going to excel in.
Jack, I see you off mute, so I want to give you a chance to chime in here too.
Yeah, and I think that it's interesting because that's really the same approach to take to kind of their post um, post law school career, post legal career, even if you decide to do something outside of the law. Really, two things that I want to emphasize and just share some experiences from my own story. One is the idea that that you are unique, and that your uniqueness is what actually makes you an asset. And being able to tell the story in your way is extraordinarily powerful. So I remember when I was an engineer back in 2000, 2002, I wanted to work for Google. Um, and I applied as an engineer and I got rejected. I never even get an email back to say that your application was received. So, fast forward a number of years later, and I had graduated from law school, gone to law school, graduated from law school, was working in a patent law firm. And just one day on a whim, I saw that there were some openings at Google for a patent attorney. And I thought, well, there's a long shot. I didn't make it the last time. But I had recently completed the New York City Triathlon, and there was a newspaper article written about me in the Trenton Times here, in a local paper in New Jersey. And so I scanned the article and actually sent it in, and I forget exactly how I did this, but I sent it in as part of my application for the job. And as I found out later on, that was the thing that really sparked someone's interest. Really is, and I had the opportunity to tell my side of the story in the way that I wanted people to know about me. Eventually, they were going to find out that I had a disability one way or the other, but I wanted to be able to couch that in a way that I wanted to be able to tell the story. And so, that's one thing that I found, and I continue to find, is extraordinarily powerful. The other side of that is what we said about being yourself is so important, because what you're interested in is what you're going to excel in and what you're going to enjoy. Sustainability is such an important part of our careers in general. Certainly in the law is true, but being interested in what you do will get you much further than getting a big paycheck right out of law school, and will actually give you more opportunities down the road as well. And so, my goal these days is to find the things that I enjoy doing. I still enjoy being a bit of a computer geek. And so I pick areas of law that require deep technical knowledge because it keeps me interested. When other things are not as interesting, that part is still very interesting, and it helps with sustainability in our careers.
Thank you, Jack. I appreciate that you've sort of brought us full circle from thinking about diversity at who are the future lawyers, to also diversity is like where are you practicing law and why are you practicing it? And there are so many different ways to create the spaces that we want to see in the future that we want to see, and like pursuing the pathway that excites you and that speaks to your unique experiences is going to be the most important thing. This is sad for me to say, but we only have a few more minutes together. And so I want to ask one final round the horn question as we wrap up our conversation this evening. We've talked a lot about the importance of self-advocacy. We've talked a lot about the importance of tenacity. I think that one thing that would be incredibly helpful for our audience is to also hear from you the one piece of advice you have of where to start, right? We have a lot of potential students out there who believe in themselves, who've heard the no's, but are telling themselves yes, but it can still feel overwhelming. You can still feel like, where do I start? Where is the place that I flex my muscle? How do I get my foot in the door? And so you've had to give one piece of advice to an underrepresented student looking to enter law school or a law career. What's one place that they could start to make that incremental move forward to the future that they want to have? Joanne, I will start with you.
Great question. I'm a checklist gal. Like I'm the person who writes like shower down so that I can cross something out. So I'm a fan of making my list and looking at it and seeing, okay, here are all the things I'm interested in or the reasons why I think I might want to go to law school. So take this big process and sort of break it down step by step so it doesn't feel so scary and overwhelming. And then so maybe, for example, one of those things on the list is like, find a lawyer so I can talk to somebody about what their life is like. And so I can collect my data and do my diligence around whether this is a profession that might seem interesting to me, understanding that lawyers do all kinds of things in all kinds of industries and everybody's day-to-day might be a little different, but maybe that's on your list. Maybe it's research a law school and contact Balsa at Harvard and see if I can talk to some students. Maybe it's research some pipeline programs that can help me understand the full landscape and give me resources. Whatever your list looks like, make it, and so that you're not as overwhelmed, and sort of just go one by one and know that this is a long game and that we all got here. You can get here if you want, but make your list. The most important thing is taking that first step. And if you're looking at pipeline programs, please look at Munger. I would love to see your application in our pile.
Anat.
Well, my one piece of advice is that Google is your friend. One thing that you guys have that we mostly didn't have is that we did not have the wide, reach of the internet. Back, not to age myself. I only graduated from law school in 2009, but for me to reach, when I was looking into law school, I was looking at AOL, American Online, had message boards to find any hard of hearing attorney or deaf attorney that existed out there. And I reach out to them on message boards and try to find out, how did you navigate law school? How did you navigate the application process? How did you get accommodations in law school? What did you do for the job application process? And so really, Google is your friend. Jack talked about now having a community, and I decided to form a bar association called the Deaf and Hard of Hearing Bar Association. If you build it, they'll come. And it was a great way to build a community. And we have over 200 members who are law students, legal professionals, attorneys, paralegals, all who have any kind of form of hearing disability, whether they were latent deaf, whatever their situation is. And it's been a great resource for law students and lawyers alike to ask any kind of question. There's no dumb questions. So really reach out, look on Facebook. There's a lot of groups out there. Whatever social medium you prefer to use, there are people there that are willing to help and answer questions.
I love that you didn't date yourself. I remember when the internet was on a CD drive, so you were fine. Jack, what are your thoughts on where you'd recommend students start?
I'd like to start off by saying I didn't pay it not to say that Google is awesome. But for me, I think the thing that I would say is start telling people about what you want. And this is just, again, not a law school thing, but like the whole life thing. Like, talk to people about what you're interested in. Tell people, hey, I'm really interested in this, because you'll be surprised. Having been on the working side of the world now for a number of years, eventually you get to the point where, you want to start giving back. And if someone comes to you and they say, I'd really love to go to law school, I'd really love to become a this and that attorney. Yeah, you try to work hard to help that person achieve their goals because you want to give back, right? And so being able to tell your uncles or your church members or anybody that, hey, I'm interested in going to law school, you never know what opportunities will come out of that. Really be surprised. So start telling people, and own the fact that you're really interested in this, and be proud of it, and be humble, of course, but know that there are people out there who may be able to take you in a direction you never even thought you would want to go. So just start talking about it.
Alyssa, and then we'll end with Chinello.
Great. One thing that is important in your law school application is your personal statement. As Anat was saying, that is what is going to make you stand out. Everything else is just kind of a number, and resume is great, but your personal statement, admissions officers do sit down and read that. So where to start is, I think a really great place to start is to start journaling. What is your story? Be authentic. What hardships have you overcome? What makes you unique? Why do you want to go to law school? And whatever just free form, just start journaling, and then something will form, something will materialize, because you do have a story. The other thing I do want to say is, whatever that story is, end it with not necessarily like literally end your essay with a positive note, but there should be enthusiasm and positivity ringing throughout your essay. I wrote an addendum of why I withdrew from 3 courses my senior year of college, but I ended it with, then I know I can accomplish things because X, Y, and Z. So if you faced a hardship in life, how are you going to use it to help other people? What have you learned from it? How has it made you a stronger and better person? And again, all this comes back to, you're going to tell your story in your personal statement. And so be authentic and be positive, and believe in yourself.
I guess I'll go. I echo everything everyone's already said, and the list I think are crucial. They were a big part of mine as well. I think to say the piece that maybe to add on to the list of things I mentioned is also like your mindset. Like, start telling yourself now you can do this. Like, don't worry about what is this other person going to get on their LSAT, what was someone else's GPA. Like, you can do this. And like, true, like, if you have to write it on your mirror when you wake up in the morning, do that. If you need I'm obsessed with planners. I buy like way more than I need for one person. I particularly like the ones that have quotes on the inside because they're motivating. If you need that, do that. And then like prepare yourself to execute, right? So like, I played sports growing up, and everything was about like practice was for game day, right? So if it's the LSAT, stick to your study schedule. If it's the your personal statement, set a timeline for when you're going to write it, for when you're going to have someone else read it, for when you're going to edit it, and like, you know, like execute, practice, then execute. And I really think that's like for me, that was the biggest piece, because I think it's everything about going to law school, that applying, that being in law school, that applying to jobs is like such a marathon that you have to, I think, prepare yourself mentally for what your next step is, right? And then again, Google, look for your resources. But I really think like change your mindset, make sure that you're telling yourself that you can do this. And then also like, don't look, we've talked about diversity in many ways, like don't look at your differences as a disadvantage. Like that should also be part of that change in mindset. So maybe there aren't as many people in your community that have gone to law school. Maybe the law school that you're applying to doesn't have the diversity numbers that they should have, right? Maybe the firm that you're interested in doesn't have that, or the public interest organization that you're interested in doesn't have that. That doesn't mean you can't come into that space. That doesn't mean there's not room for you. It just means, I like to say it, I mean, I think there are barriers and there's definitely systemic issues, but like that means it hasn't happened yet. And like you might be the yet, right? Like you might be what it's waiting for. And so don't let the lack of seeing it deter you from thinking that it's possible. Like you are the only person in this, again, about being selfish. Like I always tell people, like, you're really in competition with yourself right now. All these other people are going to apply. You have no control over that. You have no control over what people do on exams. You only have control over yourself in this process. And so give it your all, and then, you know, the rest will come. And no matter what, you'll be happy with yourself because you know that you gave it your all. So that would be my piece of advice.
Chanel, that is the most perfect note for us to end on, that it hasn't happened yet. And I do believe that the students out there watching this are the yet, and they are going to be the next stage of pulling all of us forward into a more diverse, inclusive space. Elisa, Chinello, Anat, Jack, Joanne, I want to thank you so much for your time. It was an honor to talk to you, to hear your stories, and to learn from you. And I want to thank everyone in our audience for their time as well. Thank you all and have a great night.
Thank you all.
Thank you.